The smell of mustard gas is sweet. That's what people don't understand. Sweet, almost like garlic or horseradish. Pleasant even for the first second before your lungs start to burn. I can still smell it. 30 years gone, and I can still smell it on my hands. My name is Dr. James Mitchell. I graduated from Johns Hopkins in 1915, top of my class. Had my pick of positions, comfortable practice in Baltimore, research position at the university, even an offer from Massachusetts General. I chose the Army Medical Corps instead. Thought I'd be saving lives, doing something that mattered. I saved some, lost more, lost so many more. They don't prepare you for this in medical school. They teach you anatomy, physiology, surgery techniques. They teach you how to set a broken bone, how to diagnose pneumonia, how to deliver a baby. Nobody teaches you what to do when a 20-year-old boy is drowning in his own lungs, coughing up pieces of his throat, begging you to let him die. Nobody teaches you how to look a man in the eye and know there's nothing you can do but make him comfortable while he suffocates. I shipped out with the AEF in March of 1918. We landed at Brest, traveled inland to establish field hospitals behind the front lines. The spring offensive was ramping up, the Germans making their final push before the Americans could tip the balance. That meant casualties, thousands of them. The hospital was a collection of tents and converted barns about 8 miles behind the trenches, close enough to get the wounded quickly, far enough back that we weren't in immediate danger. Or so they told us. The guns were always there, though. Constant thunder on the horizon, day and night. You learned to sleep through it. Had to. My specialty was supposed to be battlefield surgery. Shrapnel wounds, bullet extractions, amputations. I was good at it, too. Steady hands, good instincts. Saved a lot of boys from sepsis and gangrene in those first few weeks. Then the gas cases started coming in. I'd read about chemical weapons, of course. Chlorine at Ypres in 1915. Phosgene at Verdun. The British reports from the Somme. But reading clinical descriptions in medical journals doesn't prepare you for the reality. Doesn't prepare you for what a human being looks like after they've breathed in chlorine or mustard gas. Doesn't prepare you for the sounds they make. The first convoy arrived on a Tuesday morning in late April. 16 men. The orderlies were wearing gas masks when they unloaded them from the ambulances. That should have been my first warning. I wasn't wearing a mask. The gas was supposed to dissipate quickly, supposed to be safe once they were out of the contaminated zone. But these men were covered in it. Their uniforms were soaked with the stuff, mustard agent clinging to the fabric, still active, still burning. I learned that the hard way. By the end of that first day, my hands were covered in chemical burns. Small blisters at first, then larger ones, weeping and raw. Nothing compared to what those boys were going through. Nothing. That was the day I learned that some wounds can't be healed. Some damage goes too deep. The first man they brought to my station was a private from Ohio named Carson. 23 years old, farm boy, like so many of them. He was conscious, which somehow made it worse. His eyes were swollen shut, the skin around them bright red and blistered. Tears and pus streaming down his face. The gas burned the tear ducts, made them produce fluid constantly, but there was nowhere for it to go. He was trying to breathe through his mouth because his nose was destroyed, the mucous membranes eaten away. "Doc," he rasped. "Doc, I can't see anything." "You're going to be fine," I lied. It's the first lie you learn to tell. "We'll get you fixed up." His lungs were the real problem. I could hear the congestion from 3 feet away, wet, rattling breaths. Chlorine gas, maybe phosgene. It reacted with the moisture in the lungs to form hydrochloric acid. Essentially, he was being burned from the inside out. His own body turning against him. We stripped off his uniform. Had to cut it away because he couldn't lift his arms. The mustard agent had soaked through to his skin. Blisters everywhere, groin, armpits, anywhere the fabric had pressed close. Some of the blisters were the size of my palm, filled with yellow fluid. We washed him down with water and sodium bicarbonate solution. It helped a little, not enough, never enough. "Am I going to die?" Carson asked. His voice was barely a whisper. I wanted to tell him no, wanted to give him hope. But his lungs were filling with fluid, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. In 12 hours, maybe 24, he'd drown in his own secretions. Slow suffocation while fully conscious. "You're going to be fine," I said again. The second lie. The other cases were similar, some worse. A sergeant from Pennsylvania had breathed in pure chlorine when his mask failed. His lungs were destroyed. Couldn't draw a full breath, kept coughing up this pink, frothy sputum, blood and fluid and bits of lung tissue. A corporal from Texas had taken a direct hit of mustard shells. His entire body was one massive blister. We couldn't even touch him without causing agony. He just lay there on the cot, whimpering, begging for morphine. We gave him morphine, gave them all morphine. It was the only thing we could do. By noon, we had 37 gas cases. By evening, 64. The tents were full. We laid men on the ground between the cots, in the grass outside, anywhere we could find space. The sounds were unbearable. Constant coughing, choking, gasping for air, men crying for their mothers, praying, screaming when we had to change their dressings. And the smell. God, the smell. Mustard gas and chlorine and blood and vomit and infected tissue all mixed together. It soaked into your clothes, your hair, your skin. You couldn't escape it. I worked for 18 hours straight that first day. Didn't eat, barely drank water. Just moved from patient to patient, doing what little I could. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. Carson died on the second day. His lungs finally gave out around dawn. He'd been unconscious for hours by then. The morphine, thank God. But I was there when he took his last breath. Watched his chest rise one final time, and then nothing. He was the first. He wasn't the last. They kept coming. More ambulances, more stretchers, more boys who'd been told to fix bayonets and go over the top, who'd been caught in gas clouds or shelled with chemical rounds. The Germans were using everything now. Chlorine, phosgene, mustard agent, sometimes combinations. Different gases, different effects, all of them horrific. The phosgene cases were the worst in some ways. It was sneaky. A man would breathe it in and seem fine for hours, maybe a whole day. Then suddenly his lungs would fill with fluid, and he'd be dead in 20 minutes. We learned to watch for the signs: pale skin, rapid breathing, confusion. But by the time you saw the signs, it was usually too late. I remember a boy from Georgia, couldn't have been more than 19. Came in walking, talking, saying he felt fine. Just got a whiff of something, he said. Mask worked, though, Doc. I'm okay. He was dead 6 hours later. Drowned in his own lungs while I held his hand and told him to keep breathing, keep fighting, even though I knew he was already gone. The mustard gas victims lingered longer, days, sometimes weeks. We'd treat the blisters, try to manage the pain, watch for infections. Some of them went blind, temporary, permanent, no way to know which until months later. Some recovered enough to be shipped back to England, to America. But even the ones who survived were never whole again. Their lungs were scarred. They'd cough for the rest of their lives, struggle to breathe on cold days, get pneumonia that would kill them in their 30s or 40s. The blindness might fade or might not. The nightmares wouldn't fade, ever. I learned to recognize the ones who wouldn't make it. You could see it in their eyes, the ones who'd given up, who just wanted it to end. We gave them more morphine than the textbooks recommended, kept them comfortable, Let them slip away. That's what they don't put in the medical journals. The triage decisions. Choosing who gets treatment and who gets morphine until they stop breathing. Playing guard in a blood-soaked tent while boys young enough to be your sons choke to death on their own liquefied lung tissue. I performed over 300 amputations during my time in France, saved countless men from gangrene and sepsis. I was good at surgery, proud of it even, in an abstract way. But the gas cases, I couldn't save them, couldn't fix them, could only watch them suffer and die and tell myself I was doing my best. My best wasn't worth a damn. The worst part wasn't the dying, it was the waiting for death. We had boys who lasted weeks, their lungs destroyed, every breath agony, skin burned and blistered and infected. We'd change their dressings twice a day and they'd scream. The morphine helped, but it couldn't touch that kind of pain. Nothing could. A lieutenant from New York lasted 17 days. His name was Morrison. West Point graduate, came from money, volunteered when he could have had a cushy staff position. Mustard gas had gotten him, covered him head to toe. His eyes were gone, burned away, lungs filling with fluid, skin sloughing off in sheets when we tried to clean him. He stayed lucid almost to the end. That was the cruelty of it. His body was destroying itself, but his mind was clear. "Just let me die, Doc," he said on day 12. "Please, just let me go." I couldn't. Medical ethics, military regulations, my own conscience. I couldn't just kill him, even though that's what mercy demanded. So I gave him morphine, lots of morphine, and I held his hand while he wept. He finally died on day 17. Sepsis, probably. His body just gave up. I cried after he died. First time I'd cried since arriving in France. One of the nurses found me behind the supply tent, sobbing like a child. She didn't say anything, just sat with me until I could pull myself together. Her name was Ruth. She was from Maine. She'd seen just as much death as I had, probably more, but she hadn't broken yet. I envied her that. The gas attacks came in waves. Days of relative quiet. Then suddenly ambulances would start rolling in, and we'd be drowning in casualties again. You learned to snatch sleep when you could, eat standing up, work until your hands shook from exhaustion. I stopped counting the dead after the first month, stopped learning their names. It was a defense mechanism, I suppose. If you didn't know them, didn't see them as individuals, maybe it wouldn't hurt as much when they died. It didn't work. They haunted me anyway. We lost 2 nurses to gas exposure. They'd been treating patients without proper protection, and the residual agent on the uniforms got them. Burned their lungs, blistered their skin. We treated them the same as we treated the soldiers, but it felt different somehow. Wrong. They were supposed to be safe, protected. They were healers, not combatants. They died anyway. Gas doesn't care about the Geneva Convention. I started having nightmares around then. Not the usual kind, shells and gunfire and blood. No. I dreamed about drowning, being underwater, lungs burning, unable to breathe, clawing toward a surface that kept receding. I'd wake up gasping, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, the smell of mustard gas still in my nostrils, even though it wasn't there. It was always there. The breaking point came in August. The Meuse-Argonne offensive was heating up. Casualties were pouring in faster than we could treat them. We'd expanded the hospital twice, added more tents, more cots, more staff. Didn't matter. We were overwhelmed. They brought in a group of Marines who'd been caught in a mustard gas barrage. 27 men, all critical, all dying. One of them was my cousin. I didn't recognize him at first. His face was so swollen, so burned and blistered that he looked like something from a nightmare. But when I checked his tags, there it was. William Mitchell. Billy. My little cousin from Baltimore who I'd taught to fish when he was 8 years old. He was 19 now, and he was dying. "Billy," I said. "Billy, it's James, your cousin. I'm here. You're going to be okay." Another lie. The worst one yet. He couldn't see me. His eyes were burned shut, but he knew my voice. "Jamie," he whispered. That's what he'd called me as a kid. "Jamie, it hurts. It hurts so bad." "I know, buddy. I know. I'm going to give you something for the pain." I gave him morphine. A lot of it. More than I should have. Then I sat with him, held his hand, talked to him about fishing trips and summer days at the lake and anything but where we were and what was happening to him. He lasted 4 hours. 4 hours of labored breathing and quiet whimpering and my hand gripping his while his life leaked away. When he finally stopped breathing, I didn't move. Just sat there holding his hand, feeling the warmth fade from his skin. That's when something inside me broke, snapped clean in two. I stood up, walked out of the tent, kept walking past the other tents, past the ambulances, past the guards at the perimeter. Walked until I was in a field somewhere, far enough away that I couldn't hear the groans and cries anymore. And I screamed, just screamed at the sky, at God, at whoever decided that this was acceptable, that this was war, that boys like Billy had to drown in their own lungs while doctors stood by helpless. Ruth found me eventually, brought me back. Nobody said anything. They'd all seen doctors break, nurses break. Anyone who spent enough time in that hell eventually broke. I kept working. What else could I do? But something had changed. I was going through the motions now, treating patients, making decisions, performing surgeries. But I wasn't really there anymore. I was somewhere else, somewhere dark and numb where the screaming couldn't reach me. They called it battle fatigue when it happened to soldiers. Didn't have a name for it when it happened to doctors. But it was the same thing. Same hollowness. Same inability to feel anything but exhaustion and rage. I became very good at morphine calculations after Billy died. Very precise about dosing for terminal patients, if you know what I mean. The war ended in November. The hospital started shutting down. They shipped the surviving patients to England, to America, to hospitals where they might have a chance at something resembling recovery. I went home in December 1918. Baltimore looked exactly the same. Same streets, same buildings, same people going about their lives like nothing had happened. Like the world hadn't just spent 4 years burning itself to the ground. I tried to practice medicine. Opened a small office, started seeing patients, normal medicine, broken bones, influenza, pregnancies. Simple things. Things I used to be good at. I couldn't do it. Every time someone coughed, I heard Carson drowning in his lungs. Every time I smelled anything sweet, I smelled mustard gas. A child came in with croup one day, and I had a panic attack right there in the examination room. Had to excuse myself, lock myself in the bathroom until my hands stopped shaking. I lost my practice within a year, lost my medical license 2 years after that. Started drinking too much, prescribing morphine to myself. Didn't matter. I didn't want to be a doctor anymore anyway. You know what keeps me up at night? It's not the ones who died. Death I can understand. Death is final, merciful in its own way. It's the ones who lived, the ones I sent home with scarred lungs and ruined eyes and bodies that would never heal. Boys who'd spend the rest of their lives coughing, struggling to breathe, dying slowly from the poison we couldn't get out of their systems. I saw one of them a few years ago. A man who'd been one of my patients. I remembered him because he'd sung hymns while I treated his burns. He was selling pencils on a street corner, blind and wheezing, wearing his uniform because he had nothing else. He didn't recognize my voice. I didn't stop to talk, just kept walking. Coward that I am. They gave me medals, too, Army commendation, some French honor I can't remember the name of. They're in a drawer somewhere. Haven't looked at them in years. People sometimes ask me about the war. Ask what it was like being a doctor over there. They want stories about bravery and heroism and saving lives. I don't have those stories. I have stories about boys drowning in their own lungs, about chemical weapons that turned human beings into blistered, screaming wrecks, about watching my cousin die while I held his hand and lied to him about everything being okay. I have stories about the smell of mustard gas, which is sweet, almost pleasant, right before it starts killing you. I'm 62 years old now. My hands still shake. I still wake up gasping, dreaming about drowning. I still smell that sweet, terrible smell sometimes, even though it's not there. They say I saved lives in that war. Maybe I did. I don't remember saving anyone. I just remember the ones I couldn't save. The ones who drowned while I watched. The ones I let go when the morphine finally stopped their hearts. The ones who are still dying, slowly, back in America, poisoned by a war that ended 3 decades ago. War doesn't end when the shooting stops. It keeps killing. It just does it quieter. And doctors, we don't heal those wounds. We just try to make the dying comfortable. Sometimes we don't even manage that.